Good afternoon folks, welcome to Visordown and welcome to our review of the Ducati DesertX, a bike that sadly passed us by when the press launch came around a little while ago, but Ducati were very kind and they put Visordown top of the list for the press bike when it landed in the UK, so I think we're one of the first publications to get hold of this, which is brilliant because it is a bike that I've been itching to ride ever since we first clapped eyes on the concept bike at EICMA a number of years ago. And I was there at that edition of EICMA, and I remember sitting around the Ducati stage and they pulled the wraps off this amazing looking off-roader that kind of had the engine of a Scrambler 1100 and a bit of trellis frame, long travel suspension, and this modern kind of interpretation of Dakar style bodywork. And it kind of looked like a desert sled on steroids, and we were all really excited about it. And then we sat back in the bar afterwards and we kind of all thought, yeah, but if they build it, it's never going to look like that. Well, here it is, and it looks exactly the bloody same, save for some little bits of trim and an underseat fuel tank kind of looking thing that was on the concept that isn't there. This is exactly the same bike that we saw, only it's not, it's actually better. The concept bike had the wheezy air-cooled L-twin, sorry Ducati, L-twin engine from the Scrambler 1100, and this has got a proper motor. It's the Testastretta, I have to be careful when I say that, 937cc engine, which is shared across a load of other Ducati models, Hypermotard, V2, V2 Multistrada, Monster S. All those bikes have got this engine and it is an absolute wunderking of a thing. It is an awesome little unit. So this is a quick high-level overview. This is 14,095 quid, there or thereabouts. The prices kind of fluctuate, it depends when you're watching this as to how much it'll be at the moment. But it's at the top end of that middleweight adventure bike sector. So if you're comparing it to things like the KTM 890 Adventure, the Tareg 660 I suppose is comparable. It's kind of there or thereabouts with all of those, and of course the new Transalp that's just been released. But then again, with its capacity being just under 1000cc, it's also kind of comparable to the Africa Twin in a way, and the Tiger 900 I would say. So it kind of bridges the gap between the middleweight and the light middleweight adventure bikes, which kind of have sort of split off into two niches. I'm going to talk about the engine because I love this unit. It's a great little engine. I've ridden it in a few different Ducati models before, and in this one it just seems the absolute most at home that it's ever been. It is the 937cc engine, so we've got 110 horsepower and we've got 68 pound-foot of torque. It is a lovely engine to ride both on-road and off-road, and the best thing about it for the off-road riding that I've been doing, which has been some tight Nadgery green lanes over by my house, and then today we've come out to the lovely Thetford forest for a bit of a proper ramble. It's just its tractability at low revs and that low end and that mid-range grunt that this engine has got. Add that to the delivery that you get from this L-twin setup and that kind of offbeat character that the engine's got, and it just means you've got loads of drive, loads of traction. And the big Pirelli Scorpion Rally tyres have got loads of opportunity to dig into the dirt and really thrust you down the road. We have got a wet clutch on this bike, linked up to a 6-speed gearbox. It's also got a quick shifter as standard. Now I'm going to say the clutch did take me by surprise a little bit when I first jumped on it. It was quite very direct, and it was a little bit snatchy. It seemed to calm down a little bit after about 40 or 50 miles of riding, so it could have just been that it hadn't been ridden since before Christmas. But it is a wet clutch. The clutch feeling is supremely light, and I've got to mention the quick shifter because it is a very well set up piece of kit. Smooths out the upshifts and the downshifts nicely, and it's got slightly different feeling shifting schedules whether you're riding in sport mode or tour mode or urban mode. So in the wet mode, for instance, it seems like it's a bit more of a lazy shift and it does more to match the gears, whereas in sport mode and the rally mode, which I'll go through in a bit, it is a much more direct gear change with a much more aggressive upshift and downshift through the box. The chassis for this is not exactly the same as the bike that we saw on the stand at EICMA a few years ago, but it is still a tubular trellis frame at the front. It's not got the kind of the front frame of the Monster or the Panigale or anything like that, so it's got a nice trellis frame which just gives the bike a really nice balance. It doesn't feel overly rigid. It's got a nice sort of compliancy to it, and it gives the bike a really benign handling characteristic that, mated with the suspension that I'm going to go through in a moment, makes it an absolute pleasure to ride off-road. The suspension front and rear is taken care of by KYB, and this is one of the best things about the bike is the suspension. It is KYB, it's not Öhlins, but the way that it's been set up for this bike is mind-blowingly good. A lot of these middleweight, light, heavyweight, whatever you want to call them, adventure bikes, you get them on the road and they feel really, really soft and wallowy, and they dive, and you feel seasick after 10 minutes of riding them. This doesn't. It feels actually really very planted on the road, and you can push it really hard on the road, even on these road legal knobblies that are fitted to it as standard. But then you come off-road and you're kind of thinking, am I going to need to tweak it? Is it going to be a little bit oversprung? Is it going to be overdamped? And it's not. Again, they've kind of landed with the setting right in the sweet spot for my 12 stone, 5'7" frame for the type of riding that I do on these sort of wide open fire trails. You've got all the kind of the poise and balance that you need on the road, but you've still got that compliancy and that sort of ability to soak up the bumps when you get onto the rough stuff. It's very, very clever. I implore you to give it a go because it's something to behold when you get on a dirt track. Just got to also mention as well, there is a remote preload adjuster tucked away under there if you can get your fingers on it, which I basically can't when I'm wearing any gloves. So we've got Brembo 4-pot calipers on this bike, as you'd expect, and they are mated up to 320mm discs. The front brake is very progressive, but it's got loads and loads and loads of power. You can get the ABS chirping in on a dry road at the front end using just 2 fingers and not very much pressure. That's not to say they're sharp, they're just really, really powerful. There is loads of nice lever feel there as well. So it's a very nice and direct braking system, but still gives you all the confidence to use whatever braking that you feel is required for whatever you're doing. The back brake is a little more sharp. We've got a 2-piston floating caliper, again Brembo, and a 200, I think it's 96mm disc. It's much more sharp, still lots and lots of power, slightly less progressive, but it is good for riding around town, and also when you're out on the dirt and you just need to adjust your line in a corner or make a little turn and just set yourself up for an obstacle. Yeah, very nicely done. And another hats off to Ducati is the ABS system. It's full IMU control on this bike, so you've got the cornering ABS that goes into you've got cornering traction control as well. But the ABS off-road, you've got sort of different levels, so you can have ABS for off-road riding. If you go into the enduro mode, for instance, you still get some ABS to the rear wheel and the front wheel, but you go up into the rally mode, it switches the ABS off altogether. Normally I'd go into the rally mode, turn the ABS off altogether and ride the bike like that, but actually the ABS in enduro mode isn't restrictive. It doesn't hold you back, and you can still get the tail of the bike out and sort of slide the back end around, but it just doesn't let it go too far, which is what you want from an adventure bike. It's very similar to the way that the electronics on the KTM 890 Adventure perform. They let you have the fun without overstepping the mark, and that's another thing that Ducati have done with the DesertX, which is very impressive. So if you're looking at this as a kind of on and off-road adventure bike, you want to know the range, and we've got quite a big 21 litre tank, which is bigger than some of the other bikes in the class if you're looking at the middleweights. I can get around about 200 miles out of it. It's sort of, when you fill it up, it will say that you've got 240 miles range available, but quite quickly you'll use that up. But 200 miles of usable range with probably a 15 or 20 mile reserve in hand, I think is actually pretty good. Especially because most of the time when you ride this thing, you will be riding it like a little bit of a lunatic, because it's just so much fun to ride. It's really very enjoyable. But yeah, proper usable range. I did a trip from Coventry up to North Norfolk on it, so we went from Coventry up to Wales next to the sea, so it's almost exactly 100 miles there and 100 miles back. Did it on a tank and still had enough to get the 4 or 5 miles to the petrol station the next day. And the seat height on this one, I've got to mention it because I think it's quite high at 5'7", is 875mm. There is a high seat option which takes it up to 890mm, but I'm already struggling to touch the floor as it is. I'm talking about the kind of the overall chassis, all the rest of it. I've got to mention as well, I don't know why Ducati put such a long side stand on this thing, because this is leaning over this far because the side stand has sunk about that far down in the mud. If this was on perfectly level concrete hard standing, the bike would nearly be vertical, and it makes it really tricky for somebody my size to get on the bike, get both feet down confidently and lift the side stand up, and you just kind of always feel like it's teetering on the balance point. to the point that when I park it in my garage at home, I have to pull something up next to it because I'm paranoid about this thing falling over in the night, even though there's nobody there. So Ducati, next year's model, please lop about 10mm off the side stand, because it makes life so much easier for a massive amount of people. I'm going to quickly move on to what we like about the Ducati DesertX. I love the on-road handling and the way that it is still so good to ride off-road. You can have massive amounts of fun on this thing. It is a perfect machine for just doing that exact activity. Ride off somewhere where there's some trails, go and have some fun, and ride home again with a massive grin on your face. I'm also going to say that the riding position is absolutely brilliant. The upper body ergonomics of this put me in such a relaxed position. My arms just feel, there's no stress in my arms, my shoulders, my elbows, my wrists, anything. It's totally vibe free at the top and totally vibe free through the pegs, I found, with the rubber mounted dampers in there. That isn't to say that it is the most comfortable bike for distance. I'm going to come on to that in a moment, but remember that there is an issue with this bike, and I'm pointing at it right now. Another thing that I love about this bike is the electronic system on it, be it the traction control system that allows you to slide the back end without going too far, or the ABS system that just helps you out if you are on sandy surfaces or deep mud or pebbles or whatever it is that you've got in front of you. It flatters you, it doesn't hinder you, and they just work very, very well. Another thing that's good about the electronics, and a lot of other manufacturers don't do this, is that you can manipulate and adjust any of the rider modes in the TFT dash. So be it the Sport, the Urban, the Tour, the Enduro, the Rally, they're all customizable. And when you turn the bike off and you go back to it, it's already in the mode that you left it in, and all of the settings have been remembered by the TFT. I wish some other manufacturers would do that, please. So what we don't like about it, I mentioned it in the last section I was on, but this seat it's rock hard. There's no padding after a while, and about an hour of it you are basically just sat on your perineum, and it is not a pleasurable experience. I'm sure there's a comfort seat that you can blag for it and upgrade. That would be the first thing that I'd buy, just to give it a little bit more extended comfort on longer distances. Another one, and I only noticed this on the way home from Wells Next to Sea the other night, but it obviously did get dark. I was riding home at about sort of 8 or 9 o'clock, and the dip beam is woeful. You've got a flood of light covering both lanes of the dual carriageway, but it only extends about 4 meters in front of you, which isn't very far. And when you're riding along at 70 miles an hour, you need to be able to see further than that. So I was having to ride constantly on main beam. Now, it says a lot about the main beam of this bike when actually nobody was flashing me coming the other way, so it wasn't like they were exactly dazzling people. So yeah, I would say the lights on this seem to be a little bit suboptimal, and I just don't think they're quite bright enough. I think that idea of having the dip beam as an LED around the centre light is a really nice design feature, but maybe hasn't quite worked right on this one. And the final thing that I don't like is the side stand. Just make it a little bit shorter, it would make my life so much easier, please. So onto the verdict. When I saw this bike at EICMA, and when they released all the official specs and stuff and the bump, and we were reading all about it and how good it was off-road, and Ducati were telling us it was going to be amazing, I couldn't help but look at it and just think it was going to be function over form. I thought it was going to be one of those adventure bikes that looks the part but hasn't got the minerals to back it up. That is totally not the case. This bike has seriously shocked me, not just with how capable it is, but how easy it is to ride, how it feels like in the enduro mode off-road you could pretty much put anyone on this thing and they could go off and handle some obstacles and go and have some fun on a dirt track. Very, very impressive bit of kit. Granted, it is at the upper end of the price scale. Compared to the competitors that are in the market, it is one of the more expensive bikes, cracking on for £15,000 if you were to add some crash bars and some other goodies to it. That said, I think it's well worth it. I think given the way this thing looks, it looks like nothing else on the road. The way it handles when it's on the road and the way it goes when it's not on the road, I don't think there's a hell of a lot not to like. And the points that I've mentioned are really nitpicky points from me on that one. Well, I've absolutely loved having this bike. It is time to return it to Ducati UK, but I think I am going to have one more blast down the trails here at Thetford Forest before I go. Thank you very much for watching, folks. I've been Toad, and I'll see you on the next one.